I can just kick off right now. I'll just tell you, okay, how do you come up with a good new idea?
You take a shower, right?
You take a shower, you take a bath. Struck by lightning sometimes helps.
Mm-hmm. Sitting under a tree, waiting for an apple to fall on your head.
Or just sitting under a tree,
one.
Buddha. Maybe just sitting under trees in general.
Sitting under trees.
Yeah. Apple falls or not, still might get something. Bathtubs, that's where Archimedes had his realization.
Famously,
right?
yes.
Famously, Eureka.
Eureka.
So I think the way to have, if you want to manufacture good ideas, the way to have a good idea is have 99 bad ones.
Okay.
So
just
if you want
brute force numbers.
Well, it's more than that. It's when you give your brain permission to have bad ideas, you give it permission to have good ideas. But so long as you prohibit your brain from having bad ideas, you are actually prohibiting it from having good ideas too.
Right.
So the main thing is permission. Okay, brain, come up with as many ideas as you can, and it's fine if they're crap and weird and dumb or repetitive or copycat or just come up, and then you'll find when you sift through that, oh my God, there's like some really cool new ideas in here. Okay,
all right. I like it. Have bad ideas to get good ideas.
That's it.
Sweet.
That's okay, but that's not the episode for today. That's just
we
the
can't
intro.
just wrap up.
No, that's just the intro.
I was about to pack all the stuff.
No.
Okay.
Now we got to have the intro music, which should sound right now.
Nicely cued.
And we're back.
Welcome back, everybody. Hello.
Hey, everybody. My name's Adam Braus.
I'm Scott Maupin.
And this is Solutions FM, Solutions from the Multiverse.
Ooh, new branding.
Yeah, FM, like radio. I decided we shouldn't tell people we're a podcast. I like to introduce myself now and say, I have an internet radio show. Huh? New branding?
That sounds. You're
is that better or worse?
I feel like that moves backwards.
Damn it!
That seems like before we had the word podcast, we were like, I don't know how to call this thing. It's
People think you're like on Sirius or something when you say internet radio show. They're like, internet radio show? What time of day are you on? And you're like, no, it's just any time. They're like, it's a podcast. Damn it!
It's more like a song, just with no music and like really long and lots of talking. And you can do dishes while you're listening to it. I don't know.
To all of our listeners doing dishes right now, wax on, wax off.
Hey, I just got done doing a bunch of dishes and plowing through a bunch of podcasts. So I'm in that group.
Nice.
For sure.
The Pod Dish crew.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Okay, solution today.
Bring it on me.
Gross domestic misery.
Gross domestic misery.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't even pull those words apart. What do you got?
Yeah. Well, gross domestic
product.
Yes. GDP. Everyone talks about that. And people, it's the absolute, everyone loves to dog on it, right? Gross domestic product is not a good measurement. It's blah, 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 blah. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that. I haven't heard a lot of people talking about it, but maybe that's just my circles aren't GDP circles. But it does seem like one number to encapsulate the entire economy is lacking in
Foolish.
many, many ways.
Yes.
Like how they're like BMI, that means this is your health number. And you're like, I don't know, man.
Now, BMI, that's body mass index.
Yes.
What's that mean?
Well, that's where they take your height and your weight, and then they're like, now we know if you're healthy or not. And I'm like, but someone could be like super muscular or super not muscular and weigh the same thing. And that's a completely different set of health situation.
Interesting. Oh, so I don't know the first. It sounds like the Venn diagram of your circles in GDP don't touch very much, and my circles with BMI don't touch very much.
Clearly, we could tell what YouTube rabbit holes we go down in our private lives.
The YouTube algorithm knows all, reveals all.
I'm like, I'm worried about how are these numbers making it seem like eating pizzas is not healthy for me. That's not cool.
Clearly, it is healthy for me because it makes me feel good.
I disagree. If I look on YouTube long enough, I'll find someone who says that what I actually think already is true. So
right.
That's what I'm searching for.
So maybe this will fit into that category. This might actually fit into that category.
So what is it again?
So gross domestic misery.
Gross domestic misery.
Okay, so here's the hop, skip, and the jump, right? So gross domestic product, people love to dog on it. Like, hey, this isn't a great judgment of actual human welfare. Like if Raytheon makes a missile and America buys it and like shoots it at a mountain in Afghanistan or something, and they pay $30 million for the missile, that increases gross domestic product. But in what way does that increase human welfare? Like zero, nothing.
We've literally blown that money up.
You just lit that money on fire. Yeah, literally blew it up. And did it really like protect American interest? Like, no, that's just a huge waste, right? It's like 1984. Eurasia's at war with Oceania.
I love that even in 2022, the voice of like silly American ideas is still the George W. Bush like impression.
Did I do? Did
I think a little bit. You just protect American
interest. Protect the strategery. We have to use strategery.
No, it's good. It works. It's good shorthand. It's just funny to me that thing may stick around for a while.
True. So GDP is trash. People know that.
So GDP is like the number that's supposed to be how much we produce as a country.
Yeah, and you can measure it 3 different ways, and they're all the same. It's the total income of a country, or the total consumption of a country, or the total production. They're all the same because you think about it. The income is spent on consumption. Consumption is what was produced. It's an identity.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And like big country or prosperous countries have big GDPs.
Ones. Yeah.
Some countries have small GDPs. Some countries maybe even negative GDPs, and they have to work on that.
Negative? I don't think you go negative because you produce something. I mean, even if you're subsistence farmers, you produce, enough food for everyone.
All right, I'll cut that out. So that'll make me sound way better.
Cut that.
Well, see, now when we do that, I want to leave it in. That's the paradox of this.
That's why I said it. I'm actually just stealing that from the Always Sunny podcast. Do you ever watch that?
No.
They always go that, cut that. So gross domestic product, people don't like it. And so sometimes people talk about gross domestic happiness. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not heard that one.
Okay, so that was in sometime, I think it's in, I have this all written down, but I didn't review my notes. Anyways, at some point in the 90s, I think, the king of Bhutan, which is a Buddhist country in between Nepal and India. Mm-hmm. So it's sandwiched like it's like the Malta, Malta is like a tiny country.
Sure.
Or Andorra. That's like that, but in the Himalayas.
Yes.
And they're Buddhist. And the king is like a theocrat, but a Buddhist king, right? Mm-hmm. And all these like International Monetary Fund economists were like consulting this king of Bhutan, like, okay, how do we like improve Bhutan and make it better? And they kept saying GDP, gross domestic product. And he just kind of like cunningly, like with a sparkle in his eye, like looked at them and said, what about my country's gross domestic happiness? And then that just like, that like was a spark thrown on like a gunpowder keg of all these people who had all this latent dissatisfaction with the term GDP.
Sure.
And so that kind of burst into all this like activity around it. I mean, there's all kinds of interesting things you can read about it. Like I think Vermont adopted like a gross domestic happiness thing, and like certain cities have, and like Costa Rica did, and then Bhutan itself has set up an institute of study of gross domestic happiness. And it's interesting, and people get all excited about it. Oh, gross domestic happiness. We should focus on human welfare, on happiness.
Well, it kind of attacks that central lie of capitalism, which is always telling you, the way to happiness, the way to fulfillment is more money, do more,
production,
more capital, more capital,
earn more.
And then the people who get to the top of that mountain look around and they're like, hold on, wait a minute, I'm still not, this didn't do what it was promised to do. And so, you're going to turn to be like, okay, well then how do we focus on happiness how do we measure it? How do we make it into a metric that we can look at?
So that's what this Bhutan Research Institute does. And they're the best probably in the world, but other people have done it too. There's all kinds of famous like happiness surveys and studies. Oxford has one, and I think there's one in the East Coast College that did a big psychological study. Anyways, so that's really interesting.
Well, that all sounds very good.
Yeah, it's good.
The other shoe is that you're talking about gross domestic misery, which doesn't quite sound as happy at all.
Well, it does. Yeah, well, except for the point of gross domestic happiness is to maximize it.
Okay.
But the point of gross domestic misery is to minimize it.
Oh,
so
good,
you measure the misery.
Good. I'm glad you went that way.
Yeah. Otherwise, I would have left you behind, I think, very quickly. So then we just increase the misery of the country as much as possible. Just hand out razor blades to kids. And
just one morning, like 25% of the country will wake up and saw torture traps, and they have to figure out how to solve their puzzle, or else it's going to suck.
That really is the ultimate misery, wouldn't it? Saw torture puzzles.
That's where my brain goes, I'm sure.
I think you're right. That is like the ultimate misery. So the point of gross domestic misery is to say, so a lot of people think gross domestic product have problems. No, don't have to really fight about that. Even the guy who invented gross domestic product, in the thing that said we should use gross domestic product, he said, this is not a very good measure. So it's like from its inception, it's been known to be like a sort of crappy thing. But gross domestic happiness gets a lot of like airtime or a lot of like lip service, and then it actually is also not actually very good, and that's because it's actually really hard and costly to get the numbers, like to actually calculate it.
Right.
Gross domestic product is super easy. You just take like numbers provided for every country by the World Bank every month, and you can just calculate it.
Sure. Yeah.
But with gross domestic happiness, you have to like interview like 1,000 people, and every interview takes 90 minutes, and then you have to all do this like anti-biasing to each country for their culture. You have to like change the language and do everything. Otherwise, you'll ask like a Southern German whether they're happy or not, and like for them that means like, do they have a house? But for other people in another country, it means like, do they have good relationships?
Yeah.
It's all just totally different for different cultures. So to get an actual apples to apples comparison between like regions and countries, and to like get the data, it's never
a lot of work.
It's just a huge amount of work.
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of fungibility, or not fungibility, but a lot of like
subjectivity,
where they're margin of error here. You know, give us a little leeway.
And like you just have to wonder too when you look at the results of some of these things. You're like, what? Like Denmark is the happiest place. Like you meet people in Denmark, like I don't see very many smiling people. You know,
you take a plane over to Denmark, you're like, stop it, everybody.
Yeah,
you're not so happy. I don't think you're so happy. How do you feel now? Are you happy now?
Like, push their bikes over. Fuck you.
They're like, we're actually very happy. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Can we
Maybe this reveals something about my state of mind.
Am I okay? I flew across an ocean just to yell at people of another country.
Right. That's what Americans like to do. We like fly around just being mean to people because we like are actually sad at home. That's like, oh, that explains the American war machine right there. Yes. Yeah. We're all just mad at home, have to go to like Afghanistan and shut up. You're wrong about who your president is. But here's the thing. Gross domestic misery solves all of this. It's super easy to measure because you can just pull certain metrics to make it.
Okay.
And then it's apples to apples across cultures because it's way more. People can generally agree on what makes people miserable far more than they can agree on what makes people happy.
Sure. Oh, that
right.
I mean, I haven't thought about that before, but that does make total sense because like misery can kind of be calculated into a lack of things. And then if you're like happiness is like what's the exact stack on top of this that will make me happy? That's a lot more of a harder thing to wrap your head around than being like, yeah, I need safety, I need security, I need comfort, I need food, I need some form of entertainment or whatever all the things are, education.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you put entertainment before education. You're like, I need like Netflix and maybe some like schooling calculus, whatever.
Being honest, I wasn't even going to include education, and then I thought for a second.
It was like a guilt
I was
ad.
Like, this is not going to sound good. I better throw the education in.
You're like, I want pizza and I want Netflix, and I guess I should have like healthcare and education too.
That's an afterthought.
Yeah. As like a guilt.
Okay, so you can measure. How do you measure misery? That's what I want to come back to. How do you say it's an easier thing to get metrics on? How are you pulling that?
Well, you can, you have unemployment. So that's already pretty good. Workforce participation, which is like basically a proxy for unemployment. You have like, now employment isn't necessarily the most important thing because actually some people are super happy unemployed. They're comfortable, they're taking care of their kids, or they're doing something that's not like in the economy, formal employment, but it makes them very happy. And a lot of people are like retired. They're not employed. They're not in the workforce. They're super happy if they're retiring, if they're comfortable. Right. But you have other things like poverty rates. That's well documented. Right. There's even pretty good numbers that I've looked up because I pulled this all together and actually made this. So I actually made this metric, and we can actually look at the top 10 countries and the bottom 10 countries.
Ooh.
Yeah, you have to hand me my book though, which is behind you, The Future of Good, with the robot on it. This is like chapter 27 of this book.
Nice.
Yeah, so we can look at it. But yeah, basically, there's a lot of really good stuff. Education you can get through like literacy rates or like, I like literacy rates more than like number of years of schooling because it's like years of schooling isn't necessarily a good thing. What you want is the fruits of many years of schooling.
By the way, Adam won't tell you this, but I will, audience. What he's leaving through is a copy of a book called The Future of Good, and it is written by Adam Braus. Adam has written this book, so he knows it. And if you're looking for fun
Something
thoughts
super
from
fun.
Adam without me coming in and making them wonky and dumb at times, the books are the way to go. He's got some good stuff.
Yeah, it is. The Future of Good, it's called. Okay, so yeah, so basically you can measure a bunch of stuff. Gender equity,
Okay.
very well measured. You know, like Iran right now is not treating their women the right way. Other countries don't treat LGBT people the right way, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's all measured. It's all well known. So you don't have to like interview 1,000 people to find out.
And governments are open. They're like, they don't think they're doing a wrong thing. So they're like, yeah, we're not hiding this.
Yeah. There are no gays.
It is illegal to be gay here. Yes,
right.
that's
and
correct.
Women must cover their satanic
Perfect.
hair from
right.
So so those are all like, it's really cool. They also violent crime rates. You know, all this miserable stuff is like pretty well measured. You know, poverty.
And places where this stuff
like
is
that.
less are places where the gross domestic misery would be less. Right.
So I think I ended up on the Fragile States Index, which is just like all state fragility. Because you imagine if your state is like at war, or that's like misery just goes everywhere. And then Women, Peace, and Security Index. So that's like the advancement of women, peace, and then just general security.
Okay.
Infant mortality rate, which is a good indication of all these things. Healthcare.
Obviously,
it's sad when infants die, so that's miserable. Poverty rate, unemployment rate, violent crime rate, suicide rate, incarceration rate, depression rate, alcoholism rate, and drug fatality rate. I thought those were all pretty good metrics.
Now, wait a minute. How is there a depression rate? Because I don't have to log in with anyone when I feel depressed. Is that
it's clinical depression.
Have I been missing?
It's only if you're like actually diagnosed.
I'm like, is there a website I've been not fulfilling my duty
You haven't
in?
been checking in with your happiness counselor every month? Your federally mandated.
My morning depression app being like, you know what? Today I do. Right. Bam.
Thank you. I am depressed. Great. I'll be counted. Stand up and be counted.
Oh boy. Okay.
With the depressed. Okay. So here's the most GDM, highest GDM scores. Lesotho,
and a high GDM is bad. High GDM is bad.
Minimize
the highest misery.
Lesotho has a 2.26. Lesotho. Then Somalia, Central African Republic, South Sudan, which is like in a civil war, Equatorial Guinea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, South Africa's 8th, Eswatini, which I didn't know was a country.
Eswatini is a tiny country inside of South Africa, I believe.
Okay. Yemen, which is also in a civil war / genocide right now, is 10th. Afghanistan, also ruled by the Taliban, terrible.
Wow.
Sierra Leone, Haiti, which has like been just
ravaged by
forever.
Lots of people taking all the natural stuff from them and then leaving.
Yeah,
and then being like,
it's even worse than that. You know, when the slaves rebelled in Haiti, which was their founding, was when there was a slave rebellion. After that, the French were like, "You need to pay us reparations for all the slaves that are now free." And then the Haitian government agreed to that, and that put them under crippling international debt for like almost 100 years just to pay off the slave value. Can you imagine how evil you are to demand reparations, not to the slaves, which is where reparations should actually go, but to the owners of that's like today.
That's cost us property.
Man, that's what some wild. Like white supremacists should try that in America. They should say reparations for the slave owners. Oh, that'd be peak America.
They would be run right out of town.
No, I don't think so. I think they'd be like upheld. I think Tucker Carlson would be like, that's right. Those slaves were property, and those were taken away by Abe Lincoln, and therefore we have to compensate them.
Woof.
Isn't that ugly?
It's wild.
Oh, that really boils my
Haiti
blood.
blows my mind because it's such an and I do not know a lot about Haiti, but it's an example of where policy and government has had such a huge effect because it shares the same island with the Dominican Republic.
I know.
It's the same island.
It's an A/B test,
and it's just like there's a line down the middle, and it is worlds apart as far as like standard of living. It's wild.
It really is wild. And even especially even from the air, you can see because Haiti like doesn't manage their forests, so their forests all like burned down, and Dominican Republic like manages all their forests, so their forests are like these lush things. Wow. Anyway, so all the countries you'd kind of expect are on the bottom.
All right, so let's get happier.
Okay, what's so then at the very top is Norway.
With the low, this is the
lowest possible misery. Norway. Oh, well, let's go up from the bottom.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll go Norway. Okay, I already gave away.
So Norway's the big answer.
Norway's the big answer.
Okay,
but we'll go up.
Let's work up there.
So the 15th is Japan, then Portugal, Slovenia, Austria, Canada, Czech Republic, Switzerland, Denmark, Germany, Luxembourg, Finland, Ireland, Netherlands, Iceland, Norway. It kind of goes up to the Nordic. But Ireland's
places
fourth,
I want to travel.
And Netherlands is third. What's cool about this is it actually brings in you don't see. I don't think Sweden isn't here. Sweden isn't in the top 15.
It's cool to see Canada on that list. I mean, that's
Canada.
sort of not surprising. Japan. I mean, I'm a Japan guy. That's cool. I noticed
Ireland,
that you
4th.
made a mistake and you didn't include number 1 as the United States. And my understanding is the United States is number 1 in everything all the time.
So let's talk about the United States.
Is that a typo
so,
or
no? The United States is 59th. Yeah, it's 59th.
What?
The country that is less miserable directly above the United States is Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And above that is Moldova.
Okay.
And above that is Tonga.
All right, but who
those are
who
less
are we better
miserable
than?
countries.
Who's
we are
below
better
us?
than Barbados
Yeah.
and Bhutan.
Take that,
the country
Bhutan.
that even
the country of happiness.
We're way.
Maybe you guys need to work on lowering your general domestic misery.
And then below that is Serbia.
Okay.
So we're more happy than Serbia. And then Costa Rica, which that kind of threw me off because I thought of Costa Rica when I was there. I was like, this is a very happy country.
I mean, in my mind, it is like a paradise.
I know that was very surprising.
Sure.
But I think what I found from doing this research is that they're actually covering over a lot of like people just pretty poor still. So they're pretty, even though they're like living in sort of paradise, they don't have a lot of choice, kind of agency in their lives.
Right.
And then Morocco, Brunei, and North Macedonia. So we're a few positions above North Macedonia.
But definitely a thing where I guess if you ask the random American on the street where they think where America comes in this list, I bet 59 is not going to be one of the answers you get anywhere.
They might say 18th or something.
Yeah. They'll be like, okay, maybe we're crappy.
Usually America, in these happiness scores, and when they do the gross happiness studies, usually America's like right next to Poland at like 30th. That's usually where it is. But this is much lower. So when you actually measure misery, and then America scores really bad, like at the very bottom of the top third, like really bad. So yeah, it's a really interesting metric because it gives you the tractability, the ease of computation, and the apples to apples comparison because of the objectivity of misery.
Were your top 3 were Norway, Iceland,
Netherlands, Ireland. Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, like places to me that seem like they have strong social structures and lower wealth inequality problems.
They have no poverty. It's not even inequality because I didn't actually include inequality. I only included poverty.
No, yeah,
because I don't actually think if you're unequal, it doesn't actually make people miserable. It only makes you miserable if you're impoverished.
But but knowing that these places have addressed poverty, the floor, and tried to lift the floor up as a way.
They also have very strong gender equity, so that metric is a very important one. Because if you don't include gender equity, then you can be super wealthy or get rid of poverty, but now you still have every man is like limiting every woman's ability to decide things about her life and her body and her career, and that's obviously terrible.
Yeah.
So gender equity is like huge because in a way poverty in America really only affects like 30%, 40% of people are really, and only 16 or 18% are really impoverished.
Yeah.
So that's only 30, 40, 50% of people. Gender is 50% plus LGBTQ is another 10, 12%. So that's like 62% if you don't have good gender equity.
Yeah.
So those top countries also have that.
Plus it's just, I mean, it's being decent and common sense instead of being like, oh, you two humans, you are different of different values inherently. Yeah, right, that's crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's just a cool metric, the gross domestic misery.
I like it. So then I think I understand it, and I think I know where we fall in the list, and it sounds like we have work to do. So how do we do that work? What can we throw into the mix to boost us up the rankings of
that's
lower
the other cool thing about this is if you say GDP, how do you get more GDP? People usually say take out a huge loan from the IMF, open up all your trade to just be like rapaciously taken over by multinational corporations, and they will increase your GDP because they'll come in and they'll make factories and they'll produce a lot more things and your incomes will go up and your blah, 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 blah. So that's basically like, hey, if you want to maximize GDP, just allow your country to be like raped by modern global capitalism. Yeah. If you say maximize gross domestic happiness, it's kind of like, it's so subjective and it's so different for each culture that it's like, well, we should, if we're in Poland and we're trying to increase gross domestic happiness, what is the government going to do? Like have a more pierogies or something. Like, whoa, Polish people really love that or something.
It's more of a sticky problem to solve where you don't know what.
You can also do more autocracy. So you can, say you're like the central, commission of some communist country. Okay. You can be like, actually, people are unhappy from making too many choices between things. We simplify that and make their lives happier by making it so there's only one car, the one made by the minister's brother. Right? Yeah, so you can say it's making people happier just through sort of subjective.
Right. How you want to package it or whatever.
But with this gross domestic misery, it's objective because it's very clear what makes people miserable and what makes people not miserable. So you have to and then to optimize, you try to eliminate all the bad things. So you're like, hey, in a country like, in a country that's at the very bottom of the list, it's like, let's shore up our institutions, end the civil war, like obvious things.
Yes.
And then if you're in the middle of the road, kind of like the United States is, it's like, oh, actually, our infant mortality is like way higher than our other countries that are way happier. Let's improve our infant mortality. Hey, look, actually, America has really bad gender equity compared to other, less miserable nations. Let's improve our gender equity.
So instead of like how we compare ourselves to like, oh, our military and the size of their military, so we better make sure ours is bigger. If we change our glasses and we're looking at, okay, we're here on the list. Who's at the top of the list? What are we doing different than? What are they doing different than we are? Oh, the infant mortality. Oh, they have school. They have their school
better education.
And you go, okay, let's then work toward that, because if we can shift our stuff to look like their stuff, then the GDM should lower like it did for them.
Right. And we'll be better. Also interesting to point out is all those countries at the top are very, Norway has a lot of government ownership of companies and capital. I think something like 60% of their economy is owned by the government. So in a way, that's like communist.
Right.
But the way they operate those state-owned businesses is like totally capitalistic. So they're like very, very, and all those countries are very capitalistic. Ireland's like a tax haven. Norway or Netherlands is like very capitalistic. They do global trade, and they're very, even their healthcare system, which is a universal healthcare system, actually there is no government insurance or government hospitals. The government just by law owns a third of each of the 3 health insurance companies.
Oh.
So there's 3 private health insurance companies. By law, there can't be any more, I don't think. And the government owns a third of each. And then by law, everyone has to have insurance. So every one of those insurance companies has to offer a $0 health insurance thing for the government that people can have. So they have like a very free market form of universal health care.
But with a more solid floor that you can't fall through.
No one can end up without
fall through the cracks.
No, there are no cracks. The cracks have all been grouted and smoothed over, and there's no cracks.
Well, that feels like the important part.
Yeah, that is the important part. But I'm just saying, it is interesting to point out that communist countries are not at the top of this list. Mm-hmm. Neither are even really strong social democracies like France, like labor social democracies.
Right.
You can't, because there is actually a relationship between poverty and commerce, being able to do free commerce, start businesses, and so in a way it sort of tempers arguments from the left and the right, because the left would say, oh, let's like be sort of these strong labor social democracy communist type countries, and it's like, actually they don't have the lowest misery. You actually want to have like free commerce and private property and profit maximization with regulation and social welfare.
Right.
But you want that. You don't really want to be like France or Italy, really. You want to be more like Ireland or the Netherlands.
So instead of taking like a set of political ideas that's on one side or the other side and imposing them, you've sort of identified a middle road of non-political ideas that are just like
misery.
Both sides can agree on these things,
right?
Separate from the rest of their ideology, but these things just help bring up the floor and make everything better and help our country
less worse.
Yeah.
It's not even that makes things better. It makes things less worse.
Less worse.
Yeah. That's the idea. So yeah, it gives you like an object. And the cool thing would be if the IMF, which they won't do this because they're just kind of the emissaries of global capitalism. But if something like the the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, or the UN or something, if people came into a country like consultants and it was like, how do you want to make your country better? If people said, we want to use gross domestic misery as the metric to try to make our country better, the slate of recommendations would be all completely different.
Yeah.
So the metric stick that you use determines
what gets done for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I'm really proud to announce and kind of promote and introduce this metric, which no one has ever, is new. And that's why it's on the podcast.
Nice.
Yeah.
GDM. Gross domestic misery.
Gross domestic misery. Drive it down to zero.
Yes.
That's the goal. And even these top countries, Iceland and stuff, the way they could get their GDM even lower, which there is room for them, they could improve their suicide rate. Their suicide rate is suicide rates are actually pretty consistent across populations. So if you try to drive that down, that'd be good. So if they had a mass like anti-suicide program in Iceland, they might push up and go past Norway, right?
Well, and
because
then
they
that's
get rid of their suicide.
That's another, turtles all the way down thing where you go, we'll look at suicide. Okay, now what are the factors causing suicide? Let's attack those instead of just being like, we'll shout at people, don't do suicide.
Well, but most suicide, the problem with suicide, I learned a lot about suicide from doing this, from reading about this actually. It turns out suicide rates are almost constant everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird. It's not like double, like nowhere is the suicide rate like double, like triple another place. It's like 4 out of 100,000 people commit suicide everywhere.
Weird.
It's like really weird.
Yeah.
But the trick for suicide is just make it be really clear. If you're having suicidal ideation, call this number.
Please. Yeah.
That's it. Like that's what really prevents it. And so if if Iceland wanted to be even less miserable, that would be like the top thing that they would do. So it gives recommendations even to the very top.
Yeah.
So at all levels, it's a really cool thing. Anyways, cool. That's it. Should we wrap up? What should we do?
Let's do it.
Let's wrap this doggy up. If people want to read more about this, they can read my book, The Future of Good, or just contact me.
And where can people get this book? Is it available
Amazon.
Everywhere? Amazon.
Everywhere.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Look for it. Adam Braus, author and podcaster. I love it. I don't have that double hyphen. Yet. Okay.
Come on. Growth mindset.
All right. Here we go. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Hey there, thanks for listening to that episode of Solutions from the Multiverse.
Yeah, we're back with a little after roll. Hello.
Hey, after roll. Roll that after roll. So basically we want you to subscribe.
Yeah.
And rate and review and tell someone, like take your favorite solution and send it to someone who you think would like blow their mind to hear it.
Yeah, we love making the show. We're proud of it. And we're excited. We want other people to show. We know that the main way people find podcasts is word of mouth. I know that's true for me. I listen to my friends who also listen to podcasts tell me about ones, and I go, okay, I'm cluing into that. So we want to be part of that chain.
So thanks for being a part of Solutions.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again real soon.
Bye.
Bye.